good enough. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Dismal in Disguise, where we learn to create and explore how to create eerie NPCs and chaotic characters. Now in today's episode we are doing exactly that. We are exploring how to make NPCs and how to add a slightly eerie tone to their mannerisms and feel, really. Just their general feel and the vibe which the PCs get from them and the players get from them. However, without further ado, we're gonna jump right into the video. Welcome to D20 in Disguise. Now, we're going to divide this episode of Dismal in Disguise into 3 different sections. How to create generally eerie NPCs, how to create catastrophic villains, and thirdly, how to do voices for these NPCs and add even more to the depth and tone of their character. Now, if you do end up enjoying today's video and Dismal in Disguise and what it has to offer for storytellers, then please don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button if you haven't already. Now let's jump right into how to create generally eerie NPCs and how to use them effectively. Now when you first think of eerie NPC, you may think of a nervous eye twitch, a raspy voice, or some other small mannerism that adds an eerie tone to that NPC. However, you should be careful when adding these classic mannerisms to your NPCs. Players usually recognize these in a heartbeat and automatically know, well, I'm not going to trust that person, even though you may want them to trust that person, which can really kind of derail your plot if you had a specific plan in mind. So, how do we avoid this? The main way which I like to avoid it is instead of adding maybe 1 or 2 larger mannerisms that add an eerie tone to that NPC, instead add quite a few very small, very minuscule details which add that same type of tone. And remember that the NPCs themselves don't have to have an eerie tone. Just their mannerisms can point to something eerie happening, much like foreshadowing. For example, instead of a nervous eye twitch, you could have more of a hunched up posture. And maybe that NPC would also talk in a very nervous voice all the time, be nervous about something which the players don't exactly know what they are nervous about. And that is more on a deeper level, that the players don't know what this NPC is nervous about, but they're constantly nervous about something. And as long as you add maybe 1 or 2 adjectives to describe their hunched up posture and the nervousness in their voice, the players definitely won't catch on immediately. At least the average player won't. Now, if you have very deductive players, then be very careful about using this. Instead, if you have very deductive players and you're trying to add an eerie tone, be very straightforward with it. Don't try and hide anything, because they're going to find it anyway. But if you have some players which might not catch on to these things immediately, these hints immediately, then definitely add some deeper detail which hints to a more eerie and foreboding tone. And a quick side note, remember to add depth to your NPCs before you try and add this eerie tone, because you're going to need a background, you're going to need mannerisms, you're going to need what they need to accomplish in the plot to get the players where they need to be, or if they're just fluff on the side, then why are they there? What is their purpose? What are they trying to accomplish? And then after you get all of that done, move on to adding an eerie tone to said NPC. So we want to misdirect the PCs and the players so that they don't immediately realize that something is slightly off. Next, much like combat encounters, you want to think about where the PCs will meet the NPC. Perhaps you could throw them a bit of a curveball. Sometimes, adding NPCs which don't fit in their setting can be slightly eerie all on its own. For example, a young child in an elderly nursing home is strange by itself. Now, that's kind of an obvious example, because players of any type would probably catch on to that pretty quickly, that there's something wrong about this NPC. But that's just one of many, many examples which you could use in a campaign. We can also look to theater to see how we can make NPCs stand out from the crowd. In theater, they can make the audience focus on a certain character in a crowd through many different factors, some of which include the color of their clothes, the brightness of their clothes, their complexion, and many other factors. Now I'm going to put an example of the use of the color of your clothes to make a character stand out from a crowd on stage, but how does this connect to NPCs in D&D and other tabletop role-playing games? We can actually use this same exact method to make characters feel a little off. For example, maybe the PCs are visiting a ball in which there are many brightly colored dresses, brightly colored suits. However, one dress stands out from the crowd, being patterned with gray and red and black. If you start spouting out about the tone color of this dress, saying it has a tone of crimson red, and black as dark as the night, and gray to rival the coldest of steels, the players are immediately going to catch on that that is an important part of this NPC, and that black and red, the colors of death, don't usually go along very well. They will immediately get out of there. They will know not to trust that NPC. However, if you go more subtle route about it, saying she wears a patterned black and red dress, flowing down to her ankles, then the players definitely might not catch on immediately. But if you want them to catch on, then go with your exuberant amount of detail and they will immediately catch on. And if you want them to get out of there immediately and flee, then they will do exactly what you want. Giving them quite a few choices, but making the most prominent what you want them to do. Now, I think I've covered making eerie NPCs pretty well. If I missed anything which you want me to cover, then I'll make a separate small little Q&A to answer all of your questions. Anyway, we're going to move on how to make catastrophic and creepy villains. Let's jump right into it. So, creating villains is much like creating any other NPC. However, they are much, much, much more vital to your master plot. The great GM explains this very well. I would highly suggest his book, How to Make Epic Campaigns. It is a masterpiece. You can get the PDF version for, I believe, $5, something like that. Very cheap for the amount of detail and the amount of tips which are in that book. It's awesome. I'm going to stop blabbering on, however, because it's just such an amazing book. 11 out of 10 would recommend. It's so good. That's all I have to say. Now, back to creating catastrophic villains. And just as a disclaimer, many of these ideas, including the idea of a never-present villain or a brute force villain, those ideas do come from How to Make Epic Campaigns by the great GM, so just quick disclaimer. So when designing villains, you will usually use one of two types: brute force or never-present. For the convenience of this video, we're going to use never-present because never-present is by far the creepier and easier to use to make it eerie and creepy of the two. But what is a never-present villain? Let me explain. A never-present villain is a villain which is almost nearly always on the sidelines, in the background. The PCs never really should expect that this NPC is the villain, but this NPC, this villain, has different sources and such, and they allow those forces to fight the PCs while they sit in the background being the puppeteer of all of their pawns. The PCs usually fight a never-present villain, either when the PCs bring the fight to the villain, or the villain brings the fight to the PCs. However, I personally like when the PCs bring the fight to the villain, but personal preference. For example, Sauron from Lord of the Rings would be a never-present villain. The Fellowship of the Ring actually never fights him. They fight his lackeys, his pawns, his armies, but never Sauron himself. He is definitely a never-present villain. And we can play off of the idea of a never-present villain in many ways, one of which includes rumors. If the local townsfolk or local nobles know that the enemies which the PCs are fighting against do have a leader, but perhaps that leader has a code name or their identity is just unknown, then that can add some slight tension, some slight eeriness that there's more going on here than meets the eye. You can even add choice rumors when the PCs ask NPCs about this villain. For example, "So, you're wondering about Odark the Grey, are you? Well, Odark the Grey is a great mountain dwarf which turned evil once he reached his 500th year. He has a keep in the Shadowfell and has 500 chariots, led by 1,000 nightmares. He commands an army of skeleton warriors, and rumor even has it that he has a pet shadow dragon. You should be careful. He does terrible things to anyone which he may capture." So from that short dialogue, we already learned a lot of information. Now, when you're actually telling about your villain, you should probably not give them an actual name or a location, but this rumor adds quite a bit of eerie tone. They're going to have to go to the Shadowfell, there's nightmares involved, there's torture. It just builds up, foreshadows what the PCs are going to have to face in future sessions. Here's another example of a short dialogue which you might hear involving rumors about an unknown leader of an organization. "Oh, you're wondering about the Scar incident? Well, they say that whenever you fought, I have no idea what those things were, but they say that they have a leader in the northern marches of the world, which they call the Scar. This figure has great power and can invade the dreams of those which are asleep in her domain." Now we can see from that dialogue that you can be so much vaguer while adding that eerie, creepy tone surrounding that figure, in this example, this Scar person, the Scar. After getting all of your rumors, what local townsfolk, nobles, guards, and the such might know about your villain, or who surrounds them, what kind of organization they're in, and the like, then you can actually start to build up your villain. You want to build up their backstory, you want to build up their mannerisms, you want to build up the eerie tone surrounding them, and go much, much more in depth than you would with any other NPC, because you're going to need to know a lot about this villain to decide what kind of moves they're going to make against the PCs and like. But this is basic stuff. This is general stuff that doesn't really surround specifically the eerie tone which you're going for. So I think that's villains covered pretty well. The main tool which you have to add that eerie tone to villains is definitely rumors surrounding them, which may or may not be true, but you can decide about that. Next, we're going to cover the third and final segment of this video, how to do voices and voice acting for more eerie NPCs. So, my first tip for you surrounding voice acting is to just throw yourself into it. Just throw yourself into it, try a bunch of stuff, and just go all out. Next, just experiment. Just experiment with different voices. Like, get some other person in front of you, because your voice can sound different from you, from your perspective, than it might from somebody listening to. So you're going to want to get somebody in front of you just listening to the voices which you're making to see if they sound good and portray the type of character that you're trying to create and show through this voice. But let's cover specifically how to make more eerie voices. Well, of course, I can't believe this. You betrayed me. Now you will suffer for 1,000 eternities and burn in your own grave. Well, I don't know about this. It's risky. I'm not sure. It might backfire. You never know. I don't think we should do this. I don't think it's worth it. Of course. Well, remember that you came here for a reason, and you must fulfill your mission before you leave this room. What did those three voices all have in common with each other? Deeper. They were much deeper than your average voice. Now, you're going to have to lighten this up for like characters which are women, for NPCs which are women, but you're going to want to go a lot darker and deeper of a tone and a voice, because that is a classic trope of like creepy people. They have a deep voice. They have a abnormally deep voice. So I would say definitely go for deeper voice. Next, for voices, you're going to want to add something unique to this voice. So we're starting with a deeper tone, a darker tone. Next, we're going to want to add something unique. Maybe that would be more of an accent. Maybe you could decide and create your own accent for each character, then learn that accent. And that's cool. That would be great. And if you have the commitment and time for that, then go for it. But if you don't, there are easier ways to accomplish this uniqueness. One of these ways is to add outside sources, like coughing. For example, the epidemic, it's been crawling through our lands. I think I've got it myself. Please, just get out. Get out. See, that coughing really added a feel that this person was actually sick. So you're going to want to think of outside sources, what might be affecting these NPCs. And coughing is really just an excellent way to add more depth to a voice. Voice is to be much more breathy. Now, what I mean by breathy is you are just exhaling a lot of air while you're talking. For example, well, come in. We don't have very many visitors as of late. Now, that was kind of an extreme example. The PCs would probably be crawling in their skin by now and getting the heck out of there. But you can add just a bit of this to add a slight eerie tone. And of course, remember to bring up your volume while you're talking if you're going this route. Because, man, it takes a lot of power from your breath to actually make a lot of noise with that much breathiness in your voice. Anyway, I think that is how to create eerie NPCs pretty well covered. We covered how to generally make eeriness and add an eerie tone to NPCs. We covered how to create villains and add an eerie tone to them, a creepy, catastrophic feel to them. And we also talked about how to add eeriness to your voices for NPCs to exemplify the depth and the slight eeriness, the slight idea that something is off with this character. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button so you don't miss a single one of my videos. If you have any questions, please comment them down below. I'll make a separate little Q&A covering those different questions about how to create eerie NPCs. And please, don't forget to check out the last episode of Dismal in Disguise if you haven't already, where we covered how to create creepy and unsettling combat encounters. Anyway, I hope you all have a creepy day, keep on creating, and I will see you in the next video.